Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining me again for another Women's Spotlight. I'm Tara Mishral, and I'm up to big things, and I want to bring women who are up to big things to you so you can get up to big things. What does that even mean? It means how do you push past fear and live the life that you want to live, diversify your portfolio, and get out there and make some money. Anyways, with me today, I'm so happy to have my real estate agent who I do all my work with and who I would put money behind because she's not only a great realtor, one of the number one in Canada, actually, but she's actually a great woman who contributes to her community and also has a wonderful family life. So she's a woman up to it all. Without further ado, thank you for joining us, Luisa Piccirilli. Luisa, thanks for coming.
Good morning, Tara. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast this morning. I'm excited to be here and share any valuable nuggets and insights that I can with your followers as well. So thank you.
We are so happy to have you here. Luisa, you're always so busy because you've got some big things you're up to. So I appreciate you carving out some time for us this morning.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love to share and help other women if I can in any way, shape, or form. So I'm here to answer any questions and, provide any insights that I can to help, women who are maybe even thinking about, getting into a real estate career themselves.
Great. And we know there's lots of them out there. I've always wanted to get in real estate. I just haven't found the time yet. So instead of selling, I've been buying, and you have been so helpful to me. So thank you for that. And I can't wait to see how our journey unfolds over the next 2 years because I've got some big plans.
Absolutely. I love it.
So you've been in real estate for over 20 years. I mean, you grew up in real estate. If I'm not mistaken, your father was in real estate. You saw him out there breaking down doors and you thought, I'm going to get out there and do the same. But you didn't just decide to get into real estate and sell homes like everyone else. You went one step up and became a relocation expert and really help people who are moving and transitioning to make that extremely smooth. And through all of that, you've been extremely successful. You're number one broker in your REMAX office that you work in Bloor West Village. You're like number 69 worldwide for REMAX. What a huge accomplishment. And 25 for Canada, number 25 in Canada. Just for those of you at home who don't know how many realtors there are out there, there's like thousands of them. And Luisa is number one for her branch, number 25 in Canada, and 69 across the world. How do you do it?
Well, it's a great question, Tara, and I'm still working on it. I think the reality is that you're always striving to, improve, right? And you're always learning. I think is the big piece for me. And so with that is that, our job is very demanding. We work 7 days a week. We work evenings, we work weekends. So we have to be available when our clients are not working or when they're free, essentially. And so, when you're single, it's easier said than done. But, when you have a family, and I have a 10-year-old daughter and she has her activities after school and on weekends, it's very much a balancing act for me. All the while trying to not put myself on the back burner all the time, because obviously, then you have burnout, right? And so that's a key thing, not to, to have that balance in your life, right? Mm-hmm. And so for me, the first thing I want to say is that, there was a little bit of resistance for me when I was getting into real estate, because my dad actually wanted me to do it when I graduated from high school. And I resisted. I said, absolutely not. I'm going to university. I'm going to study law. I want to be a criminal lawyer. And that's sort of the trajectory that I was on. And I realized very quickly with the jobs that I had while I was in university, because I was putting myself through university and paying for that. So I had, jobs. I would start working essentially from when my last exams were done in April, right through till the end of August, until I had to start my classes again in September. And I realized I was in travel and tourism, that was my part-time job while I was in university, that, there was some glamour to that. And, I loved meeting new people and traveling and certainly getting paid for it. But at the same time, I was attending or going to Harvard University almost weekly when I was doing my Boston tours, and they have a really famous law school there. And the Paul Bernardo case was on in Canada at the time. And
Oh, the Paul Bernardo case.
and
Don't even talk about that one, but yeah.
so obviously it was all banned in Canada, but in the US it was not. And so because I was thinking about criminal law, it was something that, I was reading about. And I realized very quickly that I couldn't do that kind of work. I mean, essentially, a criminal lawyer, you're asked to defend somebody and prove them innocent, when you may know deep down inside your gut tells you that this person's guilty, and I thought I can't do something like that. And so I was working in sales and marketing, also in travel and tourism, and I had a really great job. I mean, I really did. I was making really good money. I had great benefits. I had great, expenses that were paid. But there was something pulling me towards real estate at that point in time as well. And, I had this opportunity where I realized that, I think in Ontario, I mean, right now there's over 20,000 realtors and that's a lot. And so I kept saying to myself, what can I do to make myself stand above everybody else? And I'm with REMAX, and I don't know if you remember, but their slogan for the longest time was, we're above the crowd,
Yeah.
And so
So you're like, how can I be above the crowd that's above the crowd?
Exactly. So I thought about it and I thought, you know what? We each have our unique traits, our unique propositions that we can bring to the table. And so for me, I was blessed because I have parents. My mom's Polish, my father's Italian. And so automatically growing up, I had two languages and I was fluent in both.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we started elementary school, my mom put us in French immersion. So we automatically picked up French along the way as well. So I'm fluent in 4 languages. And I thought, it would be a really shame if I didn't use any of these languages. I thought, well, there's one trait that I have that maybe sets me apart from everybody else. And when I got into the business, I have to say, Tara, that our business, our industry in real estate was very male dominated. There
Yeah.
weren't a lot of women. And I remember, 20 years ago, it was all about having your power suit and wearing your power suit and going to presentations, right?
Make sure it's only gray and white though, or gray and blue.
Yes. And so the reality is that, obviously things have changed in the last 20 years for the better, and there's definitely more women in the industry now as well, which is great. And what I love, I mean, I share, I just had an interaction with another realtor. I'll just give you a small example, if I may. And so I had sold a townhouse in an enclave, of townhomes in Mississauga.
Mm-hmm.
And we actually sold ours exclusively, and we ended up buying or finding the buyer for the property. And we sort of set a new precedent, a new bar within that complex. But more importantly, another listing came out shortly afterwards. And she said to me, well, there's no history of it on MLS because it was sold exclusively. Can you share? Can you help me out? And I did. I mean, I helped her just get the most amount of money possible for her unit,
Right.
And
Right.
we were having this conversation and she said to me, Louisa, it's so refreshing speaking with another real estate agent who is willing to help and see me succeed as well.
Mm-hmm.
And she was so taken aback because she said she actually went to say, she goes, I haven't had that experience very often in many years. So is the industry still very competitive? Yes, it is.
Mm-hmm.
But I always say, there's more good apples than there is bad. I don't see, my outlook has always been that there's more than enough business for us all to be successful. Right?
Absolutely. And there's a couple of key things that you hit on there. Like, first of all, being in the industry for 20 years, you have seen it start to shift. And the whole purpose of this podcast and show is to empower other women. But you don't just talk the talk, you're doing that. You're helping these other women. And some of them are taken aback because, especially in a sales environment, whether it be real estate or I work in IT or other areas, there is a competitiveness. There is a strive to be above the rest, as you've suggested. But I think what you're illustrating for our listeners is you can do that by competing with yourself as opposed to by competing with others. And it's very feminine to be able to sit there and strive without being ultra competitive against others, right? That tends to be a more logic driven and a more masculine trait. So if we can just step back and know that our biggest competition is our personal best, then we no longer feel competitive or threatened with other women, and we help them elevate and grow, which is, I think, what you did there. And the other thing you mentioned, which I know about you, is integrity, that came up for me when you were talking about why you altered your course of life from law to real estate. You're still helping people build the dream life, but you can do so with integrity. That's what I heard from you, right? You don't want to ever put yourself in a situation where your word and your actions are not congruent. Tell us more about where this real desire for integrity and that value was instilled in you, or where that came from.
I think that probably came from my parents and my family. I mean, there's hardcore values there, you know, that I grew up with, obviously, helping other people. You know, my grandparents, I spent a lot of time with growing up. I was very blessed to have both sets in my life growing up. And just, you know, one small example, if I may, my maternal grandfather, who is an incredible man, was from Poland. And during the Second World War, my family was Polish, but he was actually helping Jewish women and children escape Poland and escape concentration camps by hiding them in catacombs and having them shipped out of Poland, essentially. And my grandfather was never one to talk about this kind of stuff. I know that they planted a tree for him in Israel, and they sent him some kind of a Medal of Honor, and he really was not interested in any of that. I think his belief was that every human being should be helping another human being, especially when those kind of atrocities were happening. And so, you know, definitely a strong sense of values came from my family, and you know what's important. And I get such incredible satisfaction today. I mean, as busy as I am, I always make time to help other people.
You do. Absolutely. And like not just being part of several organizations and giving back to the community, which I love and respect about you, because I also think it's really important to give back. And your motto, I know, is that living is giving. But Luisa actually has gone out and found people who are living, who are homeless, and taken them and gotten them an apartment and paid their apartment for 6 months until they can get their ID, until they can get on their feet. And not just anyone would do something like that, right? So here's a woman who's performing at the top of her game, but never too busy to give back and take care of those around you. And I mean, that's just such a beautiful thing. And that desire to give back, I'm sure, is instilled from your forefathers, but you've decided to push that forward. So I just want to acknowledge you and give you credit for all that tireless work you do. It makes a difference.
Oh, thank you so much. I mean, honestly, you know, you say like something like Christmas is coming up now, right? And so most people are like, well, what do you want for Christmas? And you know what? There's no gift that anyone can give me that would equate to how I feel when I give something to somebody else or help somebody else. You know, like that's the best gift possible. Knowing that you were able to help someone pick them up from probably one of their lowest points in their lives, you know, and help them get back on their feet, you know. And when I think about, you know, I'll use Cliff as an example, because I know you and I have talked about him. It was January of this year, so January 2021, and I was walking my dog outside, and you know, Cliff was an individual in our community that people saw often. You know, he'd be, you know, panhandling outside of Starbucks or Tim Hortons on days, or more often you'd just see him in the shelter, in the bus shelter. And he was very friendly, very approachable, you know, sweet man. And you know what? None of us can really control the cards we've been dealt in life, but you can certainly change your perspective or change your attitude in how you deal with that, you know. And I realized that some people generally had an unfair advantage from the start, but I think that your attitude, if you're optimistic, if you have a way of looking, you know, my glass is half full rather than half empty, then that can change so many things too, right?
Mindset is imperative, right, Luisa? And it's not just about this positive thinking all the time and pretending that everything is perfect, but it is finding the blessing in every moment and pulling that to the forefront, right?
Absolutely. And in general, like I have to say, my attitude in life is very optimistic. It's very positive. You know, I'm a pretty cheerful person, but I don't know. It's just, that's who I am, so when I think about Cliff, he now, when I look at him now and I see him quite regularly, I mean, he's still pinching himself, he says, every morning, because he can't believe, like, he wakes up in a nice bed and he's in his own apartment, and that his life in just a few months has done this incredible change, and so that to me is amazing. And we're currently still helping another lady, Brenda, as well. And you know what? It's not easy. And I realized how broken her system is sometimes through this, because obviously I'm not a social worker and I don't know all the ins and outs. But for someone who I consider, like, I was reaching out to other people who are educated, who have connections, who have a cell phone, a computer, and even with all that, it took us months to get, a piece of photo ID, done, or to get in touch with someone who could help somebody. It's like, wow, how are these people who are homeless and have nothing supposed to help themselves? So I feel like we have a responsibility as a society. We live in this amazing country that we really shouldn't have a homeless problem. And I feel that we have a responsibility, and especially now more so than ever, Tara, because during COVID, people were so isolated. Most people were locked up in their homes, for a long time. And the problem with that was that fear was what was driving people, and that's never a good thing. And, I was walking out, as I said, I have a dog, so I had an excuse to be out there and walking and getting fresh air and oxygen into my body. And, I wanted to interact with Cliff, and say hello and how are you? And one thing that struck me about one of our conversations was the fact that people cared enough to stop and ask him if he was okay.
Yes.
It wasn't about getting something out of it, but just the fact that someone cared enough to stop and ask if he was okay.
Yeah.
And that particular day, like, it was -30 out with the wind chill and it was freezing. I was wearing proper boots and a coat and hat and everything, and I was just frozen. And I said to him, I said, listen, would you consider going to a motel? And at the time, I didn't have this grand plan of any kind. I just said, look, could I pay for the motel for you for 1 week? Would you agree to that? He said, absolutely. We packed him up with his few belongings that he had. We took him there. And that 1 week turned into 4 months. And it took us that long, to get in touch with a really good caseworker who could help him and get all his documentation in order. It turned out he qualified to have, a pension because he's over the age of 65, and some other subsidies as well. And we found him a great apartment, in the Bloor West area. And you know what? He's able to live, and it's amazing. It's amazing.
And that's such a beautiful story, because how many times do we walk down the street, see someone who's homeless or less fortunate than us, and just walk on by because we don't know what to do? And I think what we're learning from this example is just the opportunity to stop and talk and have human connection is life-changing. So just stopping and say hello, how are you, is step one. And you took it to the next level by not having a plan, but going with your intuition. As a woman, that is one of our most powerful gifts. And taking that intuition and putting that gentleman in a place where you change the trajectory of his life, right? And the same with the second person you're helping. She is a Native woman. You are trying to find support for her. And people will say, well, why are you out there doing this? And I believe one small act of kindness can change the entire world. Because if we each just do one small thing, what is within our capability of executing on, the world will have a trickle effect, and just it will spread like wildfire. And now more than ever, with everything that's being pushed at us from the government and our community and society around all of COVID and, vaxxed versus unvaxxed, we need to come at the world with more compassion, whether it be for our homeless or just our fellow mankind in general, right? So kudos for you making that difference and taking that chance, because I find what stops a lot of women is just not knowing the plan. They don't know how. They know what, but they don't know how to get there. And it sounds to me in that situation, you didn't know all the details. You just went with it. Is that fair to say?
100%. And I think you also can't be afraid to ask for help
Mhm.
because, you know, I wasn't sure about how to do this. And I reached out to a women's organization that was within my community. And one of the ladies said, well, why don't you set up a GoFundMe for him? And, you know, I never thought to do that. And I thought, okay. And I asked Cliff, you know, I said, Cliff, would you mind if I took a picture of you that I could post so that people could put a face to the name and understand who it is that they're wanting to help? And he says, absolutely. So he agreed to that. So we created this GoFundMe. And Tara, it was incredible because in a very quick amount of time, we raised $17,000 for him.
Wow.
And it was so incredible because Toronto Life magazine did a really nice write up about him and about the whole thing. And it caught on like wildfire. Ashley Greco from 104.5 Chum FM had reached out and she asked if we could do, you know, a little interview. And we did. And that created a little bit more buzz because people were finding out about his story and realizing too that he wasn't alone. I mean, there's so many homeless people out there.
It
And so
is an epidemic.
this was just one individual that, you know, we were able to help. And as I said, because of the generosity of complete strangers, you know, we were able to save up this money for him so that he's able to, you know, live in this apartment, right? And have money to buy food, you know, the basic staples. We got Sleep Country Canada donated a bed and a mattress for him and a duvet cover brand new. And, you know, other people bought some furniture. One of my stagers had offered to give some of her inventory and artwork. And so it was lovely. So he's not like he's created a home for himself in this apartment, you know, which is amazing. And most importantly, like when you see Cliff now, he has a completely different outlook on life. So much so that that rule of paying it forward, you know, I was telling Cliff about Brenda, and Cliff said to me, he goes, why don't I panhandle a little bit so I can help you get some money together to help
Oh,
pay for her motel, right? And I just thought that that was just so incredible because, you know, his life has changed so much. And he wants to help somebody else experience that who's been through, you know, similar situation, you know? And so I thought, wow, look at that. Isn't that incredible? You know, so that now he's wanting to do this for somebody else, you know, and help out in some way, shape, or form how he can, you know? And
that's
I
so
think I
beautiful.
think it's wonderful, you know, I think it's really wonderful.
hmm Yeah, and you're right. Like paying it forward, being able to do these small acts of kindness is I think, the answer, right? And whatever that may be. So if you're at home and you're thinking the holidays are coming, what can I do? You know, give money to the Basket Brigade or a food foundation. Go out there and just connect with people on a one-to-one level, because it's not about the gifts you give as much as it is about the human connection that you make. And now more than ever, you hit on it earlier, people are in a state of withdrawal from human connection. And we are like, just as a population, I feel like more depressed and there's more mental health issues going on. And even with our youth, right? We really have to pay attention. And the answer is simply human connection. I mean, we are tribal human beings. We need that connection. And
100%.
so, you know, speaking of connection, as I said, your family came here and they planted roots and they, you know, gave you an opportunity to grow, and you went in one direction, you shifted over into real estate. And when you started, you talked a little bit about how it was a male dominated environment. And I think it's important for women to know that if an environment is more male dominated, it doesn't mean that you don't belong there in your natural feminine state, right? So talk to us about that shift between the boxy suits to where you are now, because you are like the epitome of femininity to me. You're always so smiley and open and receiving and loving. But how did you take that authentic part of yourself, that really soft and nurturing part, and bring that into such a male dominated, logic focused industry when there weren't that many of you around, you know,
Yeah.
of us around? Tell us about that.
Exactly. Well, and that's a great question. And I certainly looked up to the women who were already in the industry, you know, kind of idolizing them in the sense of not just their success, but how they were doing their business, right? And I realized again, each one of us is so individual, so unique, you know, that you need to bring out what your wonderful qualities are, right? And for me, I am a nurturing person, by trade. I'm the oldest, and so I have that motherly instinct about me as well. But whether it was working with seniors, and that takes a little bit more patience. And obviously, if you're going to a listing presentation that maybe you normally would allot an hour for, you might be there for 2 or 3 hours instead, right? And so what I did was, I obviously wanted to have some kind of coaching that was going to help me out. And I did different kinds along the way, until I found something that really worked. But I found having a coach, especially a female coach, was a really great idea,
Game changer.
because it gave me some different perspective, and when I look at the industry even today, you have different types of individuals, right? You have individuals that are extremely focused on numbers. And so for them, their production is what's number one, right? Then you have individuals who seek more of a balance, a work-life balance, if you would. And for me, that is more important, and it's not so much about the quantity of the sales that I do as much as it is the quality and the interactions. And I pride myself because my business, Tara, is 95% referral based. And that is all about relationships that I've created over 20 years. And so people sometimes question today whether loyalty is still, does it still exist? Do you have customer loyalty? And I feel that the answer to that is absolutely yes.
You do. I'm loyal, I'll tell you that right now.
But it's about creating a culture of raving fans who have experienced what it's like to work with you and know that you've got their back 100%. So for me, I've had clients that came to me and said, Louisa, we've already found the house. We just need you to draft up the offer. And I'm like, hold on a second.
Yeah.
I said, you know what? Let me go see it with you. Let's see if this is really a great investment, a good fit for you. And there's been times where I've talked people out of it, and they're like, oh my gosh, but it's because I'm honest, and I wouldn't do something for somebody else that I wouldn't do for myself or one of my family members. So, that to me, I look at it this way. Someone is trusting me enough with their largest investment. And so that to me is such an honor. It's such a privilege. And so you need to take that and think, okay, is this truly what's best for my client? And that's the most important thing. Whereas you have a lot of people, unfortunately, who'll be like, yeah, buy it. That's great. No problem. Pay that much. Well, I also take a step back and say to people, okay, how much have you been pre-qualified for? Is this within the budget? Or are you going to be living to pay a mortgage and be, have no extra money left for a life apart from that, And so that's another
right? House poor.
Absolutely. And I see that often when I'm showing houses. You walk into these beautiful homes and there's no furniture in them. It's because people cannot afford to buy furniture for those beautiful homes. So that's no way to live either, And if you have, if you're accustomed to, going on a holiday once a year or going to restaurants or the movies or whatever it is, you still want to feel like you can afford to do that stuff.
Yeah, you want to calculate that all into what your investment is and how you're going to balance your life. Absolutely. And do you find, I mean, now more than ever, people have all these tools where they feel they can go and find their property on their own. They don't need real estate agents as much. How have you combated that? Because even for myself, like I'm always looking at investments. And sometimes because I don't know always the how, but I focus on the why, I'm like, okay, so I'm going to get this, this, and this, and then we'll figure out how to pay for it later. And thankfully, sometimes you talk me down. But how do you deal with those people who are out there, they're investigating on their own, and then they feel that they don't need a realtor anymore?
That's a really great question, Tara. I find that you need to show people what the value add is of having someone represent their best interests. So for example, there's a lot of buyers out there who will contact the listing agent directly and say, hey, can you represent me? Because they figure they'll get a better deal that way. The problem with that is in the type of environment that we're working right now, which is mostly multiple offers, the seller has a relationship with the listing agent, and they've signed a contract to get that listing. So even though we are allowed to have something called multiple representation, I always find that the value of having a buyer agent represent the buyer specifically, and not both the seller and the buyer
Mhm.
is huge. And so, it's educating people and allowing them to understand why it would be valuable to them to have someone have their best interests in mind and
Mhm.
represent them. It's like if you went to court, you'd want a lawyer representing you,
Mhm.
right? If
I
you're
don't want the
party,
prosecutor representing me, that's for sure.
right? So it's no different when you're buying real estate, especially given that this is people's largest investment that we're talking about, right?
Yes, absolutely. And what about like, so I've got my primary property. I'm a single mom, but I'm ready to like dip my toe into investment because I want to leave a legacy for my son. What are some of the tips you can give for people out there that are making their first time investment property? So whether it be a short, long-term rental or an Airbnb, like what are your top tips for that person?
So the first tip I would say is probably don't be afraid to do it. It's no different than when you're buying your first property. A lot of first-time home buyers are afraid to make that step forward because they don't want to step outside of their comfort zone.
Mhm.
And real growth really happens outside of that comfort zone. So why I say that is because if the financials make sense, right, then
Mhm.
there's no reason not to move forward, right? So the first step I always tell people, go and get a pre-approval. Whether it's for an investment property or your first home that you're buying, make sure that you've got all your ducks in order, right? You need to have that as a step one. Moving forward from there is finding something within the budget that you can afford, right? And sometimes people are, they don't think outside the box. I say, why have a box? Get rid of the box altogether, right?
Right.
So, you might think in your head, oh, I really want to have a property in Toronto. But Toronto might not be very feasible, right? Especially with the prices being what they are. So you might have to look outside of Toronto. So having someone that can guide you and give you good and sound advice about location, because with real estate it is location, 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 and price, right? And whether or not that particular type of investment makes sense. Does it make sense to buy a house that's in a university town where you can get 3 or 4 students living there, as an example, right?
Mhm.
Does it make sense to buy a detached bungalow where you can divide the top floor and the bottom floor and make it 2 legal apartments, right? It's finding what's going to work best within the budget that you have, right? That's the most important. And you know what? I always say to people too, don't be afraid of starting small.
Mhm.
And I'll use myself as an example. When I got into real estate, and I mean not the career, but when I got into real estate as far as investing for myself, the very first property that I bought for myself was a condo in Mississauga.
Mm.
The reason that was is I couldn't afford something in Toronto, right? So I was looking for something within a specific budget, and I knew I wanted it to be newer, not older. So I said, you know what, a condo is great because that lifestyle worked. I
Mhm.
kept that condo for a couple of years. I'd done some minor renovations to it. It appreciated in value by about 50,000. I sold it and I bought another condo in that same building that was bigger. It was a two
Mm.
bedroom. And the same thing, I did a little renos for myself on it, and it was great. And I ended up selling that and making a profit. And it was like stepping stones to get to where I am now. And
Mhm.
so you can't always, some people, and I think there's nothing wrong with dreaming big. I love it.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes you need just to be realistic about where you're starting, whether it's your first home or your first investment, and where you'll eventually end up. If you want to create a vision board for where you want to be, and that's the type of property that you want to have in the next 5 to 10 years, absolutely. I think that's brilliant. But you need to start somewhere, right?
Mhm.
And
That's
so
great advice, right? Sometimes we're so caught up in our destination and our end goal that we forget to live the life that gets us there. And who knows how that will happen in 5 years, but you've got to make some steps today to get you to that point. Absolutely.
right? And you need to have a good financial advisor, I think, too, that is going to tell you maybe look at all of your assets that you have, whether that's stocks and bonds, or whether that is your RSPs, or whether that is properties that you own or money that you have saved. you need someone who can guide you to tell you, okay, this money you're going to leave here because that's a long-term investment, right? But this money is not really doing much for you sitting in that particular account. You
Mm.
can make your money make you more money, right? And so you need someone who can also guide you that way. So you need a good real estate agent, you need a good financial advisor, and I would say a good mortgage broker and a good lawyer. Those are the good, sort of the dream team, if you would.
That is the key, right? Your mastermind alliance. Who do you surround yourself with? And that's really why I even started this podcast, is because people would ask me, who do you work with? And, having that loyalty and integrity strain myself and always trying to walk within that, I like to work with the same people. And I love to have a team that I know I can count on and trust, because it makes my decision making so much easier. If I can just call you up and say, Luisa, this is the property, give me your honest opinion, and know that I can trust what's coming from you. So for all of you out there, you heard Luisa, you need to get your dream team and you need to be able to count on them. So don't stop until you find those people, and listen to your gut, because your gut will tell you whether or not they're the right people for you. So as you're going through and you're building your career and you're building your real estate empire, you're also building a family. So you have been really successful in, having time set aside for your 10-year-old and making sure that she continues to be a priority, which is so important for us mothers out there. So talk to us a little bit about how you balance all of that.
It's not easy. I'm not going to lie.
Yes, I know.
And it is what it is. And I'm still, like I said, I'm always learning and I'm growing. And what it is and what I've realized, I'll tell you, I'm gonna backtrack now to when she was born in 2011. So 10 years ago, when Leah was born, I don't know that I was fully prepared for what was coming. And so, I was pregnant. I had an incredible pregnancy. I was working right till the end. So I don't know if I ever told you the story, Tara, but
No.
the day Leah was born, I had a relocation in town, and he had flown in. He was from Vancouver, and he flew his parents in from Nova Scotia to help him make a decision on where to buy. Now, the one good thing was we more or less had narrowed down the area to Milton. So we knew it was going to be Milton. Mm-hmm. It was February, and we knew with for his budget, it was going to likely be a townhouse. So I had one day with him and his parents. And so I had aligned, I think, about 30 showings, believe it or not.
My goodness.
And so we looked at 2 and 3 story townhomes. So, February, you go in, take off the stairs, take your boots off at every home, and up and down. I don't know how many stairs. By the time we were done, he knew exactly which one he wanted to put the offer in on. And so we drafted an offer, we negotiated, it was accepted. I thought, this is brilliant. What a great day. I still had loads of energy. So I drove from Milton to Summerhill Market, which is in Rosedale. And I went to pick up some dinner stuff, and then from there, I drove to Leaside because they had just opened up a new Marshall's. And I thought, we didn't know if it was a boy or girl. It was a surprise. Yes. And I realized I didn't have any newborn sleepers. I had the 3 months, but I'm I didn't have any newborn sleepers. I thought, let me just go check if they have any. So off I went to Leaside after that. And then I went home. And so by the time I got home, it was probably about 8:00 at night. Yeah. And I put the pizza in the oven. I went upstairs to have a shower. And lo and behold, in that time frame, something happened because my water started breaking. And off I was to the hospital. And I remember I was calling clients along the way because I had appointments booked starting at 10 a.m. the next morning to show home. And I needed to let those clients know that I wasn't going to be there. Right. And they were like, just go have your baby. It's okay. And so Leah was born, and I got home with this amazing bundle of joy. And I was like, okay, I've got to go present an offer. And my husband's like, what are you talking about? And so I think there was a bit of a shock because she came 10 days early and I had so much to do in those 10 days still, But again, it was this balancing act. Mm-hmm. If I had to do anything differently, I'd probably take a little bit more time for myself because I felt like, it was crazy, going back to work immediately. But when you work for yourself and you don't get mat leave, and at that time, I didn't even have an assistant working with me.
Wow. Yeah. That's
So
a lot on your plate.
it was a lot on my plate. And I just figured I'm superwoman. I can do this. I'll juggle everything, and everything eventually comes at a cost. And I think for me, it was, my health started to decline just because, my adrenals were going crazy saying, what's going on here? I was breastfeeding, I was running out doing offers, presenting and things like that. So, what her birth taught me was right from the onset, I realized I had this little tiny human being who was completely dependent on me.
Mhm.
And I said, I did a better job of really, I guess, finding out whether the clients that I was working with at the time were now buyers or now sellers, or
Mhm.
whether their, idea was it's going to be 3 months from now,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
So I knew that as a new mom and having a newborn baby at home, my priority was to get home, obviously to feed her, but also to be with her and nurture her. And
Mhm.
so when I was out and about, I had to make sure that my time was being used wisely and that
Mhm.
I wasn't wasting my time. And
So
so,
important, right? Because you can still do it all,
yes,
but doing it all can mean rearranging how it's done. Because
absolutely.
just like you, I never knew what having my son Ethan would do to my life, but it just made me feel complete, which sounds ridiculous because I hate that Jerry Maguire line, like you complete me, because we should be whole, complete individuals by ourselves.
Yes,
But I really feel that it completed me as just it was part of my path and I had to become a mother. And I, like you, struggled because as being a top performer, I just wanted to go, go, go. And now it was like, how do I balance this bundle of joy and my desire to go, go, go? And you said something so spot on for me. Like if I could go back, I would just allot more time. And I don't know if there's ever enough time, but they grow so quickly. I mean, yours is 10, mine is now going to be 20 in January. And I look back on some of the best moments of my life, and they were moments where I watched this little human grow into a big human. And now I have so much respect for him. I can't believe that that is a result of parenting while working. So it is possible. And
yes,
could we do a better job? Yes, I could have done better. But I think what I've also told myself, and for some of the parents out there, we can't live our life in regrets because we can't change the past. All we can do is try and do our best moving forward. And I know you're a Tony Robbins fan, so constant and never ending improvement. Can I, right? How can we just learn and be better and not be hard on ourselves about what we think we could or could not have done better before? Is that fair to say?
100%, 100%. And at the same time, too, I think about it from a different perspective where, my daughter's 10, your son's 20. And I think about how we've also been role models for them to show them what is possible with hard work and discipline and, a thought of, a dream, if you would, of this is where I want to go, so that anything is possible. So I think that's also wonderful. And I think that they see that it is possible to manage, work, life, all of it, and at the same time, taking time for yourself, to make sure that you're refueling your energy. One other thing that I forgot to touch on too was when I was being selective about the clients that I was working with 10 years ago because of my time constraints. I was also very cognizant of the type of energies that I wanted to work with as well.
Mhm.
And that is so important because if I felt like someone was extremely negative, and you can call them an emotional vampire, I didn't want to be around that kind of energy. I needed positive energy around me because I was giving that out as well. And I
Mhm.
find that you also attract into your life what you exude. And
Mhm.
so that was another, take home for me as well, is that realizing that I didn't have to work with every single person under the sun, that I
Mhm.
could be selective about who I was working with. And in that respect, that's why, you won't see my face on a billboard, or back then it was the yellow pages or anything like
The
that.
yellow pages.
I'm dating myself now, but you know, But the reality is that, you know what, my business is 95% referral based, you know,
And
so
that's huge because people don't always get it when I talk about the frequency of what you put out, but everything is energy and energy is never dying or leaving. So if you've got this constant flow of energy, you have to be sure of the frequency you're sitting in and you're emanating out. But in the same sense, you make such a great point. Be mindful of who you're working with, because if there's 8 billion people on the planet and one person is not the right customer or fit, it's not worth the dollar value for what you may get from them outside of just their business or what energy you're picking up from them.
yeah.
And I always say be diligent, not just with who you work with, but who you allow in your home, in your space, and who you spend time with, because it always makes a difference. Whether you see it or not, you are always picking up what that person is putting down. And so when you decided to get very specific about the energy you allowed in your space and who you allowed yourself to work with, did you see a shift? Did you see a shift in what happened as an outcome?
Yes, definitely. Most definitely. And you know, it's a learning process. You know, over 20 years time, you realize that, you know, some people might be a better fit for you and others not so much, you know, and that's okay. It's okay to recognize that and, you know, possibly even, you know, pass them along to somebody else who, you know, maybe would be a better fit. But even when you're, you know, looking to expand your business and create a team, for example, it's a lot of mentoring that you don't realize, and
Mhm.
again, you know, working with different individuals, right? And so you have to find the right type of fit that works, and
Mhm.
also the right type of mindset. You know, I feel like, you know, some people who are very ego driven, it might not be a great fit to be working on a team with someone else, right? And so it really depends on what your human drivers, your human needs are, and what your drivers are.
Mhm.
For me, a big one is contribution and love and connection. And so that's why, you know, I have this need to help other people,
Mhm.
and including people who could never repay you, you know, like that's the reality of it. And, you know, and that's not, that's a beautiful thing, you know?
That's the number one secret to giving, is giving without expecting to receive, to just
Exactly.
really give. And I think your grandfather illustrated that beautifully when he said, I don't need to broadcast these war medals. I don't need to broadcast this special tree that is growing to represent all of the things that I planted roots to give back. I just need to do it. And that is really, truly the secret of giving, is when you give without anything expected in return, even if it's just your love, right? Because so many times we give our love contingent on what we're going to receive, whether it's to our friends or our mates or to people on the street. Give your love and don't expect anything in return. And that's what real love and contribution is all about. And it is a game changer. At least I know it's really changed my life, because it makes me happy just to like give and not care what happens after is a really freeing thing. So I know we're coming up to time, but I just want to talk to you about two more things.
Yeah.
And one is the fear that our community and society is living in, the disconnection that many of us are feeling. I would say even the prejudice and almost slight hate that's being directed at one side or the other. I mean, it's really hard to balance. And I think we're both very big empaths and we want to see both sides of the equation. Not everyone in our communities like that. And you have to interact with a multitude of people. So how are you balancing that? How are you balancing all that energy coming at you from an external factor while you're sitting in love and contribution?
Well, I've always felt like I could have worked for the United Nations because
Yeah.
that was always an organization that I thought was very, very impressive as a kid. And
Yeah.
so, you know, I think, you know, when you're working with human beings, you know, with you know, other people, people are entitled to their opinions on things. You know what? That's the beautiful part of living in a free and democratic country, that you're able to express your thoughts, your feelings, your fears, your dreams. You know, and I think that unfortunately, you know, we've been through something in the last couple years, you know, that has kind of really rocked, you know, our society and our world, you know, and I think that, I personally don't watch the news because I feel that, it's a lot of fear mongering on the news. There's never any good news, do you notice?
Oh, yeah, that's correct. I don't watch it
So,
anymore either.
and the problem is that when you think about it, if people have been locked up in their homes, especially senior people who are in seniors' homes, and really you had no communication with the outside world, and you're sitting in a room and you've got a TV and you're watching the news, and all you're hearing is negative, negative, negative stuff. Of course you're going to be living in a fearful state. That goes without question, but the reality is that the human interaction with people is what we really need. I'm really lucky. I have a 94-year-old grandmother who's still alive.
Mhm.
And when the pandemic started, she told me straight out, she goes, I need to see you. She says, that this whole thought of not, and in the beginning, I was fearful a little bit too, Tara, because I was like worried. But you know what? I realized very quickly, this is going to kill her,
Mhm.
the isolation and not the human connection, and no hugs.
Mhm.
She needs that, and when we come to see my grandmother, I mean, my grandmother's cooking up a storm. She's usually making a homemade pizza and pasta and all kinds of amazing stuff. She needs that. That's her driver. That's her reason for living, and to be around us, and so she said to me, she goes, I need to see you, and, I get it. Everybody's comfort level was very different at the time, but I said, you know what? No, I'm going to make this effort, and so every Sunday, my daughter and I, we were driving up north, an hour and a half to go and see her.
Wow.
And, it was important. It was important to her. It was important to my dad. It was important to my mom. Like, my parents are also in their 70s now. And so, you know what? Again, like that human connection was so important for them.
Mhm. Mhm.
And it's not our job to criticize someone's choice. Some people chose not to be around other family because they were afraid, and they were afraid of getting them sick primarily, right? Everybody has to choose what's best for them.
And we
And
have the right to choose what's best
absolutely.
for us.
Absolutely. And the one sad thing that I'm seeing, and maybe it's because of the fact that, my grandfather was in a concentration camp twice, not because he was Jewish, because he was helping Jewish people
Uh-huh.
escape. And so one of the things that for me really stuck a chord is the fact that I do feel a rift in our society. I feel like there is this split. And, it's not about being anti-vax as much as it is being pro-choice,
Pro-choice.
and realizing that someone should still have that ability to choose without the duress of losing their job, without the duress of, whatever it is. And now with all the mandates and lockdowns that we've been through, and interestingly enough, like, you're looking at different parts of the world where that wasn't necessarily the case. It seemed like Canada, Australia, and New Zealand were hit the hardest with these mandates and lockdowns and everything else. And it wasn't until people started traveling, outside of those countries to say, wait a second, that's not happening there, or that's not happening there, or they're dealing with it differently, right? And you started talking to people and saying, how are they dealing with this? You realize, like, wow, like this has really been dragging on for a really long time, in Canada. And again, whether or not it was the best way to handle it, I don't know, And
Mhm.
so the reality is that people should have a choice at the end of the day, and I don't think it is our right to judge what people's choices are. It really is up to us as individuals to say, this is what I want, this is what's best for me, this is what's best for my child. I'm Leah's mom, I know what's best for her, so, but I don't judge what other people are doing. And we can still be friends, we can still get along, we can still work together. At the end of the day, like, this is our society, and this is how it's always rolled forward. You had in the States, you had Democrats, you had Republicans, you could be on completely different spectrums and still get along, right? And how they say, there's that old saying, politics and religion should never come into the equation because it causes problems. But listen, at the end of the day, you know what? We're entitled to have different views, different opinions. That's part of the beauty of living in Canada. That's always been such an incredibly multicultural country, that all these different cultures, religions have been able to exist and somehow get along, without these major rifts, And so I feel that even now, again, like, you're a good human. I'm a good human, like, let's get together. Let's talk, like, what's the problem? I'm not going to judge you if you're not vaxxed. That's your choice to make, or if so and so is, it doesn't matter, like, at the end of the day, that's your personal medical information. I don't need to know that.
And as you said, in Canada, that's one thing I've always loved about being a Canadian is the multiculturalism. And now I'm not saying it hasn't come without issues and that many in our community haven't faced struggle and strife. I do recognize that and acknowledge that. But I do also recognize that I've loved growing in a community where I've been just around so many diversified cultures, religions, and people. And I love that. And so, if that's one of my favorite things, I have to walk in that with all areas of my life, not just when it's convenient. And that means accepting people's personal choices with their medical history. So, I agree. And one of the things that's really helped me with this is exploring from a place of curiosity. And if I can sit in curiosity, fear will never prevail because the curiosity will always show me that there's always a way. There's always a way we can figure this out and make this work. Just like your grandfather going into those concentration camps, we can stand for one another and one another's choices, even if it's not in alignment with, necessarily what we believe is right or wrong. So thank you for that. I really acknowledge you for that. And I think walking in that light will emanate that light for others. Now, final question, because I know you got to get off to selling big homes out there. Go back and talk to that little girl inside, that little girl who was like 7 years old or younger. What's one thing that you would tell her to, today that you wish she knew back then?
I would say the little Louisa that everything is possible and to dream big and, not be afraid that, things won't work out because everything will work out in the end. And to go after her dreams, whatever those dreams are, everything is possible.
That's so beautiful, Louisa. Thank you. And you've gone after your dreams. So thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your cultural story about your grandfather and all the amazing things he did, your diversified background, Polish, Italian, you speak English and French as well. Thanks for taking us through the journey of starting this real estate business 20 years ago and still staying true to your integrity and your moral compass so that today all your business comes from referrals and you're still one of the best in Canada. That's amazing. All while doing wonderful things for your 10-year-old girl and your husband and being able to keep all of that in alignment while giving back and contributing to the community. This is the power of womanhood. And I am so thankful that I got to share it with you today. So thank you for being here.
Thank you, Tara. Thank you for having me. And I love the conversation. It was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, Louisa, you stay well. And thank you all for listening. I hope that this has been wonderful for you and just see what can you take from this to help diversify your life and what you're doing out there in the community. Until next time, with love and light, thank you all for being here.